a lot of people misunderstand the gender pay gap. They think that it's, say, one male senior developer getting paid more than another female senior developer, and that's a like-for-like situation. That's not as common as you might think. Don't disregard that. It does happen, and I won't minimize that, but that is not as common as it may think, and that is not what the gender pay gap actually refers to. What the gender pay gap actually refers to is average earnings. So the average earnings of, say, let's talk about maybe men in your company. If we take all the men in your company and get their average earnings, and then all the women in your company get their average earnings, what's the gender pay gap? And what skews that? I know you're all smart people. It's generally who's in leadership roles or higher roles, right? So an average is either pulled up or down by, say, all of your leadership board, your CEO and whatnot. Maybe they're all men, so their average earnings are going to be quite high. But the average earnings, say, for the women, maybe predominantly the women in your company is in the admin team, so that will be pulled down lower. So what the gender pay gap is actually, it's actually just a reference point to what that gender pay gap is within your company, but it's talking about how many women are in leadership. That's what it is. It's not necessarily like for like, it's talking about how many women are in leadership. So keep that nugget in your pocket. We'll come back to this. Now, me going through the ATO, having a fun time. I wanted to take you through some interesting things. So I looked up how many software engineers are there in Australia. And so if we look, we got about 11,000 women and about 51,000 men. That kind of makes sense. It's about 18%. The next thing I looked at was the median salary. I appreciate that the average is there, and I know the gender pay gap talks about averages, but I do prefer to talk about medians because it's the majority of people. So we can see that the median salary for women is around 87K in Australia and about 110K here for men. And that's a little bit of a difference, but you might say, you know what? There's a lot more men. That kind of makes sense. And I'll be like, oh, okay. Yeah, you can kind of maybe explain that away to me. So I look a little further. I look at testing. So I look at testing. The amount of women in testing is about 3,000. Likewise for men, similar amount of men in testing. But when you look at their salaries, still a significant difference between them, 79K to 89. I'm like, what's going on there? And I'm like, oh, you know what? It's a male-dominated scene anyway. Like, I know the numbers are similar, but it's a male-dominated space. And it's kind of like that for every male-dominated space. Engineering. So it's kind of mirroring that. I'm like, I can explain that away, right? There's nothing conspicuous going on here. So I look at a female-dominated space. I look at nursing. So nursing in Australia, and granted, this isn't entirely accurate. There's so many other definitions, but the biggest number was nurse practitioner, but it did make my heart bleed about how many nurses we have in Australia and how much they supported us in the pandemic. They're really out there doing the work for us. But if we look at how many women are in nursing, it's about 17,000. And the amount of men is significantly lower, 1,000, massively lower, right? Let's have a look at their salaries. This was a little surprising. So the women's salaries are around 65K and the men's are around 82. What's going on there? And they're like, that kind of, you can't argue against that anymore. It's not the male-dominated industry. It's not the numbers. There's something else happening. And so I think that still mirrors over to software development. It says to you as a society or a culture that I'm not thinking, again, I don't think that there's one male nurse getting paid more than another female nurse in the same role. I think that the males are getting promoted faster. I think that they're probably in more management or leadership positions. And so it kind of says that as a culture, we value or have more confidence in men than we do women.